Good morning and God bless you on this Friday morning. Today, as we ask ourselves the question, can you relate? We're going to be looking at the life of Ehud. Now, Ehud was one of the judges of Israel, and after Joshua had led the people in their triumph and their conquest of the promised land, and the tribes had each received their allotment of land, then there was a time of peace. And unfortunately, after Joshua died, the people quickly forgot about God, and they forgot about the commandments that had been given to them through Moses, and they each began doing things that were wrong in the eyes of the Lord. And pretty soon God raised up the nations around them to persecute them, to bring affliction on them, to punish them for their sins, and to get their attention back on God. And it's a pattern repeated over and over in the book of Judges. The people forget about God. They do evil in his sight. God brings judgment and punishment upon them, and then they remember and they call out to the Lord for help. So the book of Judges is a story, one after another, of that pattern being repeated and God raising up one person after another to deliver them from their suffering. So in chapter 3 of Judges, we meet the character Ehud, and Ehud is a left-handed man. That was the first thing that captivated me about him. I thought, oh, cool, he's a left-handed guy in the Bible. That doesn't happen very much. But Ehud is an assassin. He's sent by the people of Israel to pay tribute to Elgon, the king of Moab. And he goes into the palace chambers, appears before the king, brings the tribute of Israel. And then he says something to the king. He says, "King, I have a secret message just for you." And the king dismisses his attendants, and it's just the two of them left in the chamber. And it said earlier in the story that Ehud had a dagger made 18 inches long, and he had it strapped to his right thigh. And being left-handed, as he drew close to the king to whisper the message, Ehud leans in and says, "I have a message to you from God." And he, with his left hand, he reaches across and grabs the dagger and plunges it into Elgon's belly. And it says that Elgon was a fat man, and the blade sank in so deep that even the handle of the dagger was swallowed up inside of him. And it goes into some pretty graphic details that I don't necessarily need to repeat today. Well, Ehud makes his escape, and he goes back to Israel, and he blows the trumpet, and he calls the warriors of Israel together, and that day they defeat in battle the Moabites, and they drive them from the land, and they are given a time of peace and prosperity that lasts for 80 years. Well, as you think about that story, like I said, as a kid, I loved it. I thought it was cool. He's left-handed. He's an assassin. He's a warrior, and he led the people to victory against the Moabites. This is cool. He's my hero. And the question is, when you read a story like this, where on one hand, he was the one who delivered the people of Israel from their suffering, and on the other hand, with clear premeditation, he murdered this king. He assassinated him in his own chamber. It brings the question of violence and the question of what links are appropriate when it comes to doing the work of God. And of course, many people say that, well, that was the Old Testament time, and when Jesus came, he taught us something differently. But we still live in dangerous times where there are evil people that destroy and hurt those who are innocent. And what is our response to be as Christians? Here's where I confess that I can relate to Ehud. There is a part of me that when I see wrong, when I see people that are being hurt or slaughtered, when I watch the news today and what's been going on the last couple weeks in Afghanistan, there's part of me where my blood boils and I want to go in there and do something about it. And there's part of me that's like, yeah, give me a gun, I'll fight. But the question is, where is my heart in relation to God? And where is my heart in relation to other people? Now, I believe that there is a time that, given the sin and the evil in this world, where we must be prepared to defend others. But I question myself is, do I look for it? Do I look for a reason to have a hostility? And it's not just with violence, it's even in arguments. And I worry about this in our culture today, that so many of us are so stressed, so angry, so worried about the future, that sometimes it's almost as though we're looking for a fight. And I want to remind you, when it comes to the question of violence, but when it comes to also the question of just arguing and defending our opinion and our views, I don't want to relate to Ehud that closely. Because I think of what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, toward the end of the Sermon on the Mount. He says, "So in everything do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets." Wow, you have one little verse that sums up everything that's written in what we call the Old Testament. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And how does it feel for you when you're met with aggression and hostility and people that are just looking for a fight, whether it's physical or verbal? Most of us don't like that. Most of us can't relax when we're in the presence of people like that. So if we're going to do unto others as we would have them do unto us, we need to make sure we take our heart and we make sure that our heart is not only right with God, but with other people. Because again, Jesus said, the greatest commandments are these: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, there are times in this fallen world where if our neighbor is being harmed and it's within our ability to protect them and defend them and stop those who are doing wrong from hurting them, then it's our responsibility, our obligation under Christ's teaching to do what we need to do to end the oppression and to end the violence and protect those who can't protect themselves. But the question again is, are we guarding our heart that we don't give in to that desire for our own vengeance and our own anger to be unleashed upon others? I think of what the Apostle Paul says in Romans chapter 12, verse 18. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. So as you think about Ehud, this left-handed assassin, this judge who delivered Israel from their oppression and suffering under the hand of King Elgon, the Moabite king, what is in your heart today when it comes to the wrong and oppression that goes on around us? Are we simply so indifferent to it that we don't say anything and we don't allow it to affect us? Or do we burn with an anger to get vengeance and justice, and all of a sudden we find our hearts being polluted as well? It's one of the things I pray for myself, and I pray for our church and our whole community, is that we find people of goodwill that will do what is right, whatever it takes, and that God grant us the courage, the wisdom, the restraint to have and act according to His will and not our own. So I invite you to do some reflecting on these teachings of Jesus and these sometimes conflicting or at least gray areas when it comes to how we live out our life of faith. But in all things, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. God bless you.